I was living in Binghamton, New York, and it was very, very, very busy at that time because you had IBM, you had Endicott Johnson, and they made shoes, and they transferred, of course, over into wartime. And I remember, of course, the pollution wasn't that much of a thing then, and I can remember you could smell the rubber, what they call the rubber factory. They were making boots and soles and things, and it, of course, permeated the whole town. We didn't have television at that time. When you went to the movies, in between, we had 2 films. You paid 12 cents, and you got to watch 2 full-length films. And in between, they would have the news, and you would see a snippet, we'll say 1 to 2 minutes of the war, and that was about it. And I think we lived that way through the war. But I can remember my parents' friends, they all got drafted, and one of them, I had the measles, and he came and visited me and hoped he got the measles. He wouldn't have to go into the service. But they all served. One served quite an amount of time in a prison camp, and that was pretty rough. I can remember when he came home, he was just skin and bones, and he never talked about it, of course. They didn't. They came home, they got married to girls that they left behind, and they came and went back to work. I don't think as kids we really understood the really bad part of the whole thing, except that I think we went along with the country that you were more frightened of the Japanese than you were of the Germans. You were really afraid of the Japanese were really going to take over the world, more so, or they were mean. I remember V-Day, VJ Day, D-Day and VJ Day, and it was, cars were driving up and down and blowing horns, and everybody was, it was a wild time. I was too young to frequent the bars, but there was a lot of bar activity in Binghamton, and it was a happy time. I could vaguely remember rationing, but we didn't, it wasn't too bad. You used to have books of tickets, little tickets, and you would take little tickets and you would go in, you could buy so much meat with the tickets, or I think canned goods, because everything was being sent to the GIs, or everything that they could. I was coming home from the library, and he had passed, and it was really a very, very sad thing. I mean, I don't think people really understood, and it was a tough time because he had taken us through the war and through everything. He and Eleanor, and she had to have a lot of credit for all of the good times, and getting through. I can remember, one thing I remember was knitting. We learned to knit in school, And we knitted squares, and people would give us yarn, and we'd knit squares, and then they put the squares together for Afghans, for the GIs in the hospitals. Unfortunately, my grandmother both my grandmothers and grandfathers came from Europe. And my mother speaks fluent Russian, or spoke fluent Russian. My father spoke fluent Italian. They didn't want us. They wanted us to be Americans. So they never taught us, either one of us, to speak, unfortunately, because I would love to have known both languages.